Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Uh, for those of us in India, yes, we have had to change our timing of the webinar thanks to daylight savings time. That has, I think, gotten called off or started in the US, however it works. And this is today episode number 28 of the Unboxing AI webinar series. And for those of you who don't know, this is a weekly webinar by CARPL. We do this every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, now 9:30 p.m. India, and everywhere else in the world. And the idea is to call some of our friends, collaborators, customers, partners, and hear their story and allow you all to ask some questions from them. And for those of you who don't know what CARPL is, we are your friendly neighborhood AI platform, allowing you to navigate this complex ecosystem of amazing companies building tools for everything from fractures to functional MRI. And that brings me today to our guest, Laina Emanuel. Uh, I've known Laina for almost 6 years now, although she says she started the company in 2019, but it might actually, I think I've known Laina for since before the name Brainsight was coined. I remember it was called something else at the time. Laina, thank you for taking the time and thank you for agreeing. I know we've moved you around a little bit in these webinars in the past, so thank you for being so flexible.
Thank you
Excited
so much
to
for having me.
no, not it's truly an honor. For those of you who don't know, Laina graduated from NIT Calicut, was a software engineer, did operating system design for several years at NetApp, at Infosys, then worked in international development at the Clinton Health Access Initiative, at Access, several other places. Then once she had, had her quota of that, went to the Indian School of Business, uh, did her MBA there, then went back to the international development world, and then decided to become an entrepreneur and start Brainsight in 2019. Why, Laina? Why? Why would you do something? Why would you take your seemingly perfect life and absolutely ruin it?
I think that's a good question. But first of all, let me just thank you for having me here. And I think I have a tendency to destroy my life at regular intervals. I think I did that when I went from operating system design to international development. I think my mother was aghast when I decided to take a trip across India, going to like these very remote places. And she was like, my daughter's gone off the rails. And I think I did the same thing when I started Brainsight as well. But I think when I met Rim Chim, who's my co-founder, the idea being that she'd done work in connectomics and in resting state functional MRI for psychiatric disorders. And having worked in international development, I saw the potential of her work was so um, expansive that I was like, it makes total business sense to actually try and make this into a business. So if I have to do a business, and this is really the first time I'm doing something like this, I might as well do it for a really hard problem, which is really exciting. So I think that's where this came from.
Nice. So, Lina, I know that there've been a few iterations of product at Brainsight. So, can you, like, for the benefit of folks here who may not know, what is it exactly that you guys do, and how does it change patients' lives?
Great. And I think the easiest, rather, I think because the audience here consists of clinicians, so maybe I'll talk the non-technical terms. For people who are non-technical, I usually use the phrase Google Map of the brain. But for
Hmm.
clinicians here, what I'll say is that we do connectomic analysis, which is essentially looking at whole brain functional mapping of the brain using three different MRIs: your structural MRI, your resting state functional MRI, and your diffusion MRI. the three of these together give you a very good sense of the functional maps of the brain, and that's what we do.
Interesting. So how is that useful? Like, how does that help?
So connectomics analysis and research actually it has implications across neurosurgery, neurology, and psychiatry. So I can give you some examples, but it's really all encompassing. In surgery, it helps you do better functional planning for the surgery. So the current methods, like your task-based fMRI, can be pretty long, and for people who are comatose or very old or very young, task-based fMRI often doesn't happen. And so how do you kind of map their functional maps so you can avoid functional loss for brain tumor, epilepsy, all of those cases? So that's one big area in which we work. But connectomics also is one of the earliest indicators for dementia, and it's the only body-based indicator for psychiatric disorders. So being able to track the rehabilitation of psychiatric patients, connectomics is very useful. I think the challenge in research, a lot has been shown about how this can be useful. The challenge really is how do you take it out of research into clinical use?
So how?
Great. I think the big thing is to be able to and I think this is a question that CARPL really grapples with all the time, right? Like, how do you take research and make it dependable, predictable, and safe for the patient? How do you ensure that you've taken care of all of the risks that are associated with something like, let's say, a probabilistic tractography, which probably is um, so deterministic tractography, you're far more able to kind of show where and how it could be wrong. But for something like a probabilistic, you need to be able to show with the correct methods how it'll be safe for the patient. I think a lot of what we do is about thinking about all these risks and being able to de-risk for that. That's one part of how do you take it out of research into clinical use. Second is I think researchers in medical universities
So
have been
sorry,
doing,
like
yeah.
sorry, Laina, like if I may, what is a risk associated with like doing something like this? You mean like
So, for example, when you're looking at functional maps of the brain using a task-based fMRI, there it's fairly obvious because you're using a task to evoke potential in certain areas of the
so
brain.
for those who don't
Yeah.
know, basically a task-based fMRI is an MRI scan that is done while somebody tells you, say, for example, to do finger tapping, right? So you are doing this and your MRI is happening, and in real time, you're able to see what part of the brain gets activated as you're doing this task. Now, what Laina's company does is without actually doing the task, they can try to figure out what area of the brain is responsible for doing a certain task, right? That
Correct. Associated with certain functions like your language, etc. So now, so a risk could be the fact that when you're looking at a task-based evoked potential, it's fairly easy to map the task or say that this area is associated with language function.
yeah.
When you're taking it at a resting state of a patient and the patient's actually not doing any task, you need to be able to prove with a lot more studies, with a lot more things, that this is indeed matching with language. So I think those are the kind of things that we have to do to ensure the safety of what we are doing. So that's one part of how do you bring it out of research into clinical use. The second part of bringing out of research into clinical use is the fact that I think researchers have been doing connectomics for a while. And if you talk to any PhD who's been working in the field of connectomics, it takes them at least a year to set up that entire pipeline to do a good connectomic analysis. Now, and if they are interested in medical issues and they find a doctor, the doctor might tell them, hey, I have an epilepsy patient. Why don't you do a connectomic analysis and give it to me? But it's very rare to find a PhD who's focused only on medical issues and not on like
Mhm.
more fancier things like consciousness and stuff like that. So you you need to be able to make it industrial grade and fast, right? Before you actually give it for clinical use. You can't have a doctor sitting in a hospital here when he's seeing so many patients, wait for a PhD student to do it at their
Yeah.
free time. So you kind of need to be able to dockerize it, build it, and make it fast and predictable. I think that's the second part of getting from research into clinical use. And the third part, I think there are four parts. The third part is really a lot of what we do is so much math. So I remember the first time when we took our results and we had lots of maths and a lot of like numbers on our reports and we took it to the doctors. And I remember one doctor telling us that, listen, I left math in like 10th standard. So please do not show me all of these numbers. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And so we had to really figure out how to take all of that computational neuroscience and convert it into like language that doctors are familiar with. Yeah, so I think all of these elements
Right.
are part of bringing.
So tell me another thing, Lena, like, uh, so as 95% of what you say goes over my head, uh, running a deep science startup in India is a pretty yeah, just by function of like, it's not the biggest problem in India that you're solving, right? Like you're solving one of the biggest problems in neuroscience. Two of that, running a company, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think, yeah. So starting a business in such a domain in India, uh, what do you wish you had known, like when you started, that you know today? Like what would you have done differently?
I think I think the gist of what you said is so true. Like I think in India, running a deep science, deep tech is hard because it's not addressing the biggest problem. I might have I might have set this up in another country if I had known this better.
Hmm.
But also, I think it comes with the pros and cons. I think building from India gives us a kind of arbitrage which you won't get from another country. But it's a slow learning, right? Like when you're starting off and you want people to invest in you, you want people to think about what you're doing and find it useful. I think that time India was probably a more difficult market to do. I think India is also, but I find it fun because when in India, you can actually work with different business models, which are probably not something that you can work with. Because India is such a varied healthcare system. You have private, you have insurance led, you have everything, every possible combination. And so really as a business person, I like the excitement of being able to figure out new models and how to kind of get this done. So I think that part about India is more exciting.
Pretty cool. And in terms of like just generally uh neuroscience and also how your product relates to it. Like are there, there is like this whole longevity boom going on, right? Where like people want to figure out ways of like delaying aging or even measuring aging, and people want a brain score and somebody else wants like a metabolic score and this score. Uh, are you dabbling in that as well, from a neuro perspective? Like would
Not
you
yet.
be okay?
Not yet, but we do get requests. So I think we consider ourselves an infrastructure to be able to do that in the sense that
Hmm.
Connectomics is actually like think of it like when you're looking at a picture and there's so many pixels, and then at a brain level, you have so many voxels. And what we are able to do give is at every voxel level, we are able to give statistics. Now, for a doctor who's making a decision at the moment, those many statistics is what that doctor told me. Please don't give me all of these statistics. This is useless, right? But when you give it to a research person who's working on longevity, it's gold for them. They can actually then kind of use that to be able to run different analysis, come up with different ways of calculating brain scores, etc. So we do
Hmm.
get requests for that, but we have not dabbled in it ourselves.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Cool, yeah. And what is the biggest challenge of running a startup in India?
I think you and I both would know. I think in your case, it's across India and US. I think in India, being able to, it's a very discerning market. And so you really kind of need to get a lot of value in return for being able to charge patients. So I think there's that whole piece which we are figuring out right now. It took us a while to figure it out, but I think we're here now.
Interesting. So like market commercialization in that sense.
It's hard, yeah, and especially, and I think the other piece in India which is difficult is the fact that I think research in India is a lot more underfunded, and hence a lot of doctors who are don't really see things coming out of research into clinical use in the same way that possibly a US would look at it. So I think there is that adoption which we had to really drive, which we think would have been easier somewhere else.
Interesting. So we've got a question from I think Arjun AA. Arjun is my chief of staff, and I asks very difficult questions. So so how does Brainsight prioritize its roadmap when balancing research-driven innovation with commercial scalability? I think yeah, this is like I'd love to hear your thoughts on like when do you stop doing research and start selling, and how do you then balance that whole equation?
We've come to a point where, like, I think from the point we started, that commercial has always been a very important reason for, like, it has always driven our research, let me put it that way. When we take a decision of getting into a disorder, it's because we see commercial value in it.
Hmm.
And on a sprint basis or on a monthly basis, what we really look at is the research really leading to something which can convert into clinical value. So that has been, I think, as a startup, we don't have the luxury to marinate a lot in research. I think as we get bigger, we probably might want to marinate more in research than what we do right now. But right now, the commercial priorities really
Yeah, I
decide
think
how
I
we
think there's
go.
also there's also Lina, at least the way we think of it, there's also a difference between doing research and selling to researchers, right? The latter works pretty well because if you can, as you said, right, if you can reduce the work of a PhD, you can literally take their PhD down from 7 years to 5 years, right? Because at the end of the day, their PhD will end when they deliver some kind of outcomes. So do you sell to researchers as well, or do you currently only do
So
clinical sales?
I think, Vidur, we've been very focused on clinical so far, where we've been only working on doctors uh, for clinical applications. We do get requests for research, and we are now trying to figure out, because researchers need as you said, right? Like for a PhD who's trying to figure out how to reduce their time in the PhD, what they want is a lot more data about the brain.
Hmm.
And we anyway kind of create that. All we need to do is to kind of package it well and start selling that. We haven't started that yet, but we get a lot of requests for it.
Interesting. Maybe maybe when your team is bigger.
Yes, maybe. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
No, I think because the DNA of our team is so research driven, it
Nice.
works. They all love dabbling in a lot of papers, reading a lot of neuroscience papers, figuring out new ways to do things, which is great. And they would love to be able to do more of catering to research as well. But we've kind of put the brakes on it for some time at least. Yeah.
Cool. So just switching gears a little bit, you had, if I may, like, zero neuroscience background prior to, starting Brainsight with Rimjim. Uh, how for, there's a lot of folks out there that are, developing passion about something that, they may not be technically very uh sound in. What would be your advice to folks like that, right? Like, what makes you successful, what makes you and Rimjim, your co-founder, successful. Any advice you have for youngsters who are maybe not technical but want to get into a very technical sciencey venture?
Mm, I think um, I consider myself a polymath in the sense that I dabble in a lot of different subjects. It's what I enjoy. I think if you put me into, if you just, and which is what my career also shows, right? Like if I had to do operating system design all my life, I think I would be very bored with my life. So in general, I really like doing a lot of different things. Uh, but I think and what I've realized is people try and specialize too soon. And even within specialization, they kind of say that I'm an engineer, I'm an electrical engineer, and I can only understand that and not change to something else in a couple of years. And I think if I had to give an advice, and you really are pushing me to give one advice, I usually don't, but I think it would be that keep your keep your curiosity high and don't specialize. don't
Hmm.
don't box yourself. The world is anyway going to box yourself and like box you into one category. So I think you yourself should not be doing that.
Interesting. So then how does somebody uh, or you're saying that for that point in time become an expert in that thing, but don't think that you're going to be doing that forever? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say that because I think and maybe this doesn't work for everybody, right? Like I think some people really like specializing in one thing and keeping on increasing their expertise in one area. But I think there are people like me who like dabbling in a lot of things and being able to switch gears. And usually
Hmm.
that's not very acceptable, especially in a country like India, right? Like where you're expected to specialize very early on. I think my message is for those people who want to try out new things that don't specialize. Don't consider yourself boxed in, and you can
Hmm.
actually give yourself the permission to explore a lot of different things.
Interesting. Nice. We've got another question from Arjun. Are there any non-healthcare industries where BrainSight's technology could be applied? Interesting.
Well, for sure. I mean, Connectomics, I mean, has wide array of applications. So medical is just one of them. The second, I mean, pharma is a allied field. There's lots of work that can be done with Connectomics and pharma. But beyond those, I think what Connectomics allows you to build is a very detailed model of the brain, which can then be used in so many different ways. You can use it to build better cognitive architectures for things like robotics. You can use it to build, I mean, we get requests from people who are using fMRI for their marketing studies because they want to figure out how a person reacts to a particular advertisement. So I think those are some of the things that we get requests for. And there are possibilities. I think there are possibilities of building businesses entirely for those verticals. We haven't tried it yet, but that's a different
Yeah,
matter.
I think neuromarketing could be, an amazing vertical, especially now with the compute power and all that.
True.
Once upon a time, I used to be very interested in it. So,
Yeah,
but
that's pretty cool. I think
yeah.
what
So for those
one
who don't know, neuromarketing is basically, uh, you study the brain and get people to buy your thing.
yeah, well, no, but I think the one which I have been very excited about outside of medical uses has been how do you build better cognitive architectures of the brain? Better cognitive architectures built on the basis of brain. So today, your Chat GPT, etc., are built
Hmm.
on by scanning millions of books, right? It really doesn't. It's not built on how actual brains work.
Yeah.
Um, Brains forget things, and that's probably the way that things are made more efficient. How you could efficiently remember so many things is probably because you are able to forget certain things. And I think these kind of elements are not built into the cognitive architectures of things these days. we're still some while away from it, mainly because the brain is so understudied. So I think as we learn more about the brain, build better models of the brain, these are some of the things that we could move towards. But that's far in the future.
No, talking about the future, Arjun has become very curious today. Like, as a follow-up, do you foresee a future where AI can assist in the understanding of human consciousness itself?
I think there are PhD researchers who are working on consciousness and how I think there's a very specific way in which I think AI can assist in the understanding of human consciousness, which is that the brain being such an understudied uh, thing and such a vast trove of information, how do you use AI to understand better patterns of the brain and hence be able to understand human consciousness? But that's a very, I don't think it answers your question because it's a very limited view of how AI can improve human consciousness. But yeah, I'm sure there are other
Hmm.
ways, but I find them a little fantastical. So
But do you think like yours is probably one, if I may use the word tool, that is currently not going to be disrupted by this whole large language model uh, movement that is happening?
I think it'll enhance the large language model movement because, as I said, your LLMs are today built on millions of text, right? Like, and
Yeah.
what it's essentially doing is predicting the next word and then using, and you can build from there, right? But if your LLMs can be enhanced using a better understanding of the brain. So I do think that it'll be the other way around. And hence, I'm sure there'll be
Interesting. So
uh,
I'm just going
yeah,
to like interject, Lina. We've got this very interesting question that has just come in. Anonymous attendee, which also translates to AA. Can we use this in precision career profiling?
we get requests like this.
Oh,
I
really?
we do. So I think I think I am not comfortable with that.
What
And
does this even mean? Like, is this person going to be a good engineer or
yeah,
something
pretty
like
much.
that?
We get questions like that, and we get like, hey, maybe we can build a tool around that, etc. I think possibilities of kind of building tools on a better understanding of the brain are immense. Um, I also think it has the possibility of causing a lot of harm, and hence it's something that I don't think I am very comfortable with doing.
But theoretically, the tech is the same.
Theoretically, that there is the understanding of the brain is there, and now I mean, the understanding of the brain to some extent is there, and you can, I mean, there's so many people working on better understanding the brain. But I think as you keep unraveling more things about the brain, there are ways to build on that and build tools like this, like career profiling, stuff like that, which I think, yeah,
What are
as I
other
said,
examples?
we, I mean, I've got,
what are other requests that you get, like as the last question, that are like
requests
non-clinical
for
in
lie
nature?
detectors, better lie detectors. And we've got requests um, for what was, yeah, I think for career profiling, for understanding. I think one which our team itself is very excited about is being able to increase the appreciation of music in people who are probably not musically inclined, and things like that. I think there are hundreds of things that you can do when you understand the brain better, but I want to focus on things that will actually create revenue, I think. So,
Did you get a request for predicting stock market emotions?
not
I'm
yet.
sure that not yet. Yeah, stock market doesn't have a brain. Maybe they do. I don't know. Cool. No, thank you so much, Laina. We try to stick to time in these, but thank you so much and congratulations on all the progress. You remain an inspiration. It's amazing how well you guys are doing here. So keep it up, and we are all rooting for you.
Thank
So
you so much. And likewise, thank
thank
you.
you. Thank
Have
you.
a great
Thanks,
day.
Lana.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.